He called the cleaning lady to mock her. But when she showed up stunning, she left everyone in shock. Before we dive into today's story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love to know how far these stories are reaching. And if you enjoy emotional love stories full of twists and triumph, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you help our work grow and keep bringing stories that touch the heart. The afternoon in Austin was golden, with the sun shining against the mirrored windows of the Harrington Enterprises building. On the 18th floor, where the marble gleamed like gold and the air smelled of power and expensive coffee, laughter echoed from a meeting room turned lounge. Young men in suits toasted glasses of sparkling wine while Blake Harrington, in a custom-tailored, charcoal gray suit, held a whiskey glass in one hand and his phone in the other. At 31. Blake was the quintessential heir of the Texan elite, tall, athletic, lightly tanned skin, and cold green eyes that could intimidate without raising his voice. His light brown hair was perfectly slicked back in a deliberately effortless style. He had an easy, charming smile, the kind that masked poison behind its allure. "Listen to this," he said, turning to his friends. "You know the blonde who cleans the 21st floor office? The one who always walks with her head down, wearing that hideous uniform and those worn-out sneakers?" "Rachel something?" asked Trent, laughing. "Montgomery, I think," Blake replied with disdain. "The name doesn't matter. She looks like she came out of a charity ad." Laughter filled the room. One of the colleagues, excited by the cruelty of the moment, threw out a challenge. "What if you invited her to the company's charity gala, huh? Imagine her in that ballroom, surrounded by Austin's elite, tripping in heels and trying to balance a champagne glass?" Blake smirked. For a moment, his gaze drifted to the glass, fixed on some invisible point. Then he turned and replied, with irony, "Deal, it'll be educational." That same afternoon, he went down to the lower floor. Blake rarely left the eye of the empire, but that day he went in person. The environment was completely different. Quiet hallways, worn floors, the scent of cleaning products, and windows fogged by the city's heat. It was there, turning the corner, that he really noticed her for the first time. Rachel Montgomery was on her knees, scrubbing the floor diligently. The navy blue uniform hung from her delicate shoulders, and a few strands of platinum blonde hair had slipped from her messy bun. Even in her simplicity, she exuded something that made him pause, a silent dignity. Her fair skin caught the light, coming through the window slit, and her eyes, a deep, tired blue, carried more story than he could comprehend. Rachel looked up when she noticed the expensive leather shoes. Blake held his posture. She stood up slowly, wiping her hands on her apron with a touch of shyness. "Mr. Harrington," she said softly, "do you need anything?" For a second, he hesitated. He wasn't prepared for the gentle strengthen her presence. "Actually, yes," he replied. "We're organizing a charity ball for the staff. A sort of tribute. We'd like you to attend." "It would be an honor." Rachel blinked, surprised. "Me? But I'm just—" "You're part of the team," he interrupted, "as important as anyone else." She didn't know what to say. Her fingers clutched the fabric of her apron's hem as if seeking support. "Thank you. I'm honored. But are you sure?" Blake smiled. "Absolutely." She nodded slightly in thanks. As he walked away, still unsure what had just happened, Rachel leaned against the wall and looked at her calloused hands. She had never been noticed, never invited. Something inside her warmed, hope or danger, she couldn't yet tell. Back? In the elevator, Blake didn't smile like before. His friend's words echoed like poisoned laughter, but Rachel's face, that looked so full of silence, would stay with him the rest of the night. Rachel stood there for a few minutes after Blake left, holding the envelope with the company's gold-embossed crest. The paper was firm, heavy, made to impress. Her name was handwritten in perfect cursive. None of it made sense. She stared at the invitation like someone looking at a gift left at the door by a stranger, too beautiful to be trustworthy. She climbed the stairs to her small apartment building in a distant Austin neighborhood where sirens were more common than applause. Upon entering her studio apartment, a tiny one-room unit, with the scent of lavender, peeling walls, and furniture rescued from thrift stores, she tossed her backpack in the corner and sat on the edge of the mattress. She read the invitation again, and again, and once more. Her blue eyes were marked by fatigue, but there was a new sparkle in them, a painful doubt, and a hope that insisted on flickering. Later, she knocked on her neighbor's door. Mrs. Evelyn, a retired seamstress who wore thick-rimmed glasses and kept an old sewing machine by the window. "I need your help," Rachel said, holding the invitation. "I've been invited to a party, and I have nothing to wear." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, suspicious. "What kind of party, girl? A company ball? They say it's to honor the employees, but I don't know. It seems too good to be true." The old lady read the paper carefully and then looked at her with tenderness. "You've always thought you didn't deserve good things, haven't you?" Rachel lowered her head. "I just don't want to fool myself." "Then let's do this. If it's true, you'll shine. If it's not, you'll shine even brighter to show no one mocks someone with dignity." From the back of the closet, Evelyn pulled out an old dress from the days she used to sew for weddings. It was made of teal satin, but stained, with a broken zipper and a torn hem. Rachel touched it like someone handling a relic. "It used to be beautiful, and it will be again, just like you." For 2 nights in a row, after work, Rachel helped Evelyn rebuild it. They sewed side by side under the warm kitchen light. Rachel added beading on the shoulders, redid the straps with lace fabric, and improvised a small sweetheart neckline. Her hands trembled with exhaustion, but her heart, it beat differently. While stitching the final details, Rachel paused for a moment and looked at herself in the small mirror on the living room wall. "Do you think someone like me can ever be truly seen?" she asked softly. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She simply stepped closer, adjusted the fabric on Rachel's bodice, and murmured, "Being seen, my dear, isn't about clothes. But sometimes clothes help the world see what's always been there." Rachel smiled, eyes brimming with tears. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. Even without knowing what awaited her that night, even with the fear pounding inside, there was a fire lit, and deep in her heart she dared to dream that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her for who she truly was and love her. On the other side of town, in a quiet penthouse, Blake replayed security footage. He paused on a specific moment, Rachel lifting her gaze. The dignity in her eyes haunted him. Something about that woman, whom he didn't even really know, made him feel things he couldn't name. And when he closed his eyes that night, it was her he thought of. It was her he dreamed of. Night had fallen, and with it, the artificial glow of the luxurious facades of the Harrington Grand Hotel lit up the Austin sky like a stage set for applause or booing. The main hall, decorated with crystal chandeliers and white orchid arrangements, pulsed with classical music in the background and the constant clinking of champagne glasses. There were the suit-wearers, the wealthy, the heirs, all impeccable in designer gowns and custom-made suits. Blake Harrington leaned against the bar, a flute of sparkling wine in hand, surrounded by the friends who had joined in the plan. Trent, the most sarcastic of the group, looked around and joked, "Think the mop-wielding Cinderella's here yet?" Blake smiled half-heartedly. Since he'd seen Rachel that afternoon, something inside him had shifted, as if the tune of the prank had soured into a bitter note. At the entrance hall, Rachel stepped out of the car slowly. She didn't wear high heels, but simple, old shoes, lovingly restored. The teal dress, the one she and Evelyn had stitched with such care, hugged her silhouette with grace. Her blonde hair, usually hastily tied up, now flowed in soft waves down her back. Her face wore only a touch of shimmer in her eyes and a light lipstick. But what truly caught attention was her posture, poised, dignified, unshakable. Rachel took a deep breath before the golden doors and heard Evelyn's voice echo in her mind. "If it's a lie, let them be ashamed when they see you shine." She walked in, and the world stopped. Conversation ceased. Glasses froze. Mid-air. All eyes turned to the main door as if a star had fallen from the sky and landed right there. Blake saw her. His chest tightened. She was no longer the employee in a stained uniform with tired eyes. She was a whole woman, radiant, with the beauty of someone who knows herself and is enough. "Is that her?" one of his friends whispered, his throat dry. Blake didn't respond. He just watched her in silence. An unexpected and uncomfortable feeling rose in his throat. Shame. Rachel walked in with calm steps, without hesitation. She knew she was being watched, judged, but instead of lowering her head, she raised her chin. Her eyes searched for the host of the night and found him. She saw Blake, and Blake saw everything she was, and everything he had ignored. Rachel stopped a few feet away from him. She smiled softly, as if she knew the truth behind the invitation, but at that moment she didn't need to say anything. Her presence said it all. "You came," Blake murmured, finally. "You invited me," she replied, steady. "I thought I should accept." Before he could say anything else, she turned and walked toward the ballroom, leaving behind a trail of silence and admiration. Trent swallowed hard. She wasn't supposed to look that beautiful. Blake didn't take his eyes off her. "I wasn't supposed to feel like this." In that instant he knew the joke was over, and he was the only one exposed. The orchestra played a soft melody in the background, mixing violins and piano with the muffled sound of conversations in the hall. Rachel walked among the guests like someone stepping through a minefield, cautiously, but without fear. Eyes still turned to her, some admiring, others trying to decipher who this woman was that no one seemed to recognize. She stopped by the appetizer table and picked up a glass of sparkling water. Her hands trembled, though her face remained calm. The dress she'd stitched with Evelyn seemed to come alive under the golden lights. And yet, something inside her whispered, "This place wasn't made for you." That's when she felt a presence behind her. Strong, silent. "Blake, you look incredible." His voice was low, hoarse, as if trying to contain an emotion he still didn't understand. Rachel turned slowly. His green eyes were fixed on hers, and there was something different in them. It wasn't arrogance. It was admiration. And maybe regret. Rachel raised an eyebrow, keeping her composure. "You didn't expect to see me like this, did you?" Blake gave a small smile, without irony this time. "Actually, I didn't expect to feel this right now." She tilted her head slightly, as someone who's heard empty promises before. "Feel what? Surprised that I can walk in a straight line wearing a nice dress?" "No. Feel like maybe I made the biggest mistake of the night." Rachel gripped the glass more firmly. Her eyes studied every feature of his face as if searching for truth in his words. "Blake, why did you invite me?" He hesitated. He didn't have a noble answer. And she knew it. Rachel stepped aside, creating a small but meaningful distance. "I came because I wanted to give myself a chance," she said firmly. "But that doesn't mean you deserve it." She turned and walked to the other side of the ballroom. Blake watched her go, her silhouette disappearing among the guests like a shadow that refuses to fade. He took a deep breath and for the first time felt out of control. For the rest of the night, he watched her silently. He saw her smile shyly at a sweet older lady. He saw her politely decline a dance invitation from a young company assistant. He saw her pause near one of the windows, gazing out at the city alone, and he felt his chest tighten. Because that look in her eyes, so steady, so gentle and yet so distant, was a fire that burned slowly. And it was already burning inside. The ballroom still buzzed with discreet comments when Rachel left the event. She walked alone to the spot where Evelyn had agreed to pick her up. Already barefoot, her shoes in hand and her feet aching, but her heart restless. She had faced a world never meant for her and not only survived, but made a mark. Still, she had no idea what was about to happen. The next morning, Rachel's old phone wouldn't stop vibrating. First with messages from her neighbor, then from cleaning staff colleagues, and finally from unknown numbers. It was Evelyn who rushed into Rachel's apartment, eyes wide and phone in hand. You're everywhere, girl. Look at this. The video showed Rachel entering the ballroom. Recorded on a phone, it captured the exact moment she walked through the doors in that hand-sewn teal dress, her hair glowing under the lights, her posture regal like a modern-day princess. The caption read, "The cleaning lady who silenced the rich." The clip, less than 20 seconds long, already had over 1 million views. The comment section was exploding. Who is she? This woman has more class than all those influencers combined. I want this story made into a movie. Cleaning lady? She looked straight out of a Dior runway. Messages kept pouring in. Invitations to TV shows, local news outlets, women's podcasts. Everyone wanted to hear the story of the woman who appeared like an anonymous star among Texas elite. Rachel, unsure how to react, squinted at the screen and whispered, "They'll laugh at me when they find out who I really am." Evelyn answered firmly, "They already know, and even so, they loved you." Meanwhile, across town, Blake sat alone in his glass-walled office, his laptop open with that same video on loop. He didn't know if it was the same one everyone else was watching, but to him, it was different. To him, that video was a mirror, showing who he had been and everything he failed to see. He ran a hand over his face, eyes tired. He tried not to admit it, but something inside him was growing stronger. It wasn't guilt. It was desire, admiration, the start of something. He had never felt with any of the perfect women he used to date. "She doesn't belong in my world," he murmured. "But why does it feel like it's the world where she shines the most?" Rachel's suddenly packed schedule now took her to humble events. Interviews taped in coffee shops, chats on community radio, stories and empowerment blogs. And in every single one, the same question: how did you find the courage to walk into that ballroom? And in every one, the same answer: I didn't walk in to be seen. I walked in to remind myself, I'm bigger than what they expect of me. Each time he saw a new clip of her online, Blake felt the weight of his own arrogance. He felt shame, but he also felt hope. Because deep down, he already knew. He knew he was in love, and that it was far too late to pretend he wasn't. The sudden fame hadn't changed Rachel. She still took the bus in the morning, still lived in her peeling wall apartment with carefully folded clothes, few but clean. But the looks were different now. Where once there was invisibility, now there was curiosity, respect, even envy. Still, she knew that public exposure had a price. And Blake's silence after the gala still echoed like a question with no answer. A stuffy Tuesday afternoon, while finishing up cleaning a reading room at the community center where she now volunteered, a former coworker from the Harrington Enterprises cleaning crew showed up at the door. Margie, older, always wore a floral scarf on her head and had a restless heart when it came to injustice. "Rachel," she called, hesitant, "I don't mean to get in your business, but there's something you need to see." Rachel took off her gloves and wiped her forehead. "What is it?" Margie handed over her own phone. "This is why that invitation happened, and you need to know." On the screen was a series of leaked messages from a group chat between Blake and his friends. Screenshots shared by someone. Inside the company. The date, 2 days before the gala. "Tomorrow the blonde from cleaning will be my guest of honor. It's going to be the best entertainment of the night. The cleaning lady at the elite party? This is going to be legend. Can't wait to see the board's faces when she walks in." Rachel couldn't finish reading. The hand holding the phone began to tremble. He humiliated me from the start," she whispered, her voice tight. Margie tried to comfort her. "Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe, but he never told me," Rachel interrupted. "He let me believe. He let me feel." That night, Rachel didn't sleep. She spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every glance, every gesture, every word from Blake. The whispered compliment. The way he looked at her. The touch in his eyes. Lies out the next morning, she went to the Harrington Enterprises building. She wore a plain white blouse, dark jeans, and had her hair tied in a low bun. She took the elevator to the 18th floor with her old service badge. No one stopped her. Blake's office was elegant and silent. He sat in front of his computer, wearing a light gray blazer with no tie. When he saw her enter, he stood up immediately. "Rachel, you wanted me on the outside," she said, interrupting him with a firm but trembling voice. "But you mocked what I am on the inside." Blake furrowed his brow. "I can explain." She stepped forward, holding her phone with the screenshots. "Explain what? That I was a joke from the beginning? That every word you said that night was just part of the act?" "No," he replied, moving closer, his eyes filled with urgency. I started as a jerk. It was a bet. I admit that. But everything changed when you walked into that ballroom. You disarmed me, Rachel. I fell in love." She let out a bitter laugh. "You fell in love with who, Blake? The woman in the pretty dress? Because the one with a broom in her hand. You used her for fun." He reached out, almost as if to stop her from leaving. "I messed up, and I regret it. I swear, but it was too late." Rachel stepped back, her eyes welling with tears. "When? You have everything, Blake. It's easy to say you're sorry. But when you come from where I come from, a humiliation like that doesn't disappear with pretty words." She turned and with steady steps left the room. She didn't cry until after the elevator doors closed behind her. But when they did, the tears fell like a long-held rain. And in that moment, in the pain tearing through her chest, she understood. Not every burning gaze is love. Some are just the cruel reflection of misused power. Night fell over Austin with a dark sky, heavy with clouds. Blake had been driving aimlessly for over an hour, his grip firm on the wheel, his mind a whirlwind of what had happened. The image of Rachel walking out of his office, eyes full of tears but dignity intact, haunted him. His phone screen lit up with dozens of messages from Trent and the other guys. He ignored them all. Their laughter now sounded like shattered glass in his mind. He turned left, took a side road, and finally stopped in front of a modest white wooden house, the paint peeling with time, a narrow porch, and windows with floral curtains. The grass in the yard was overgrown. The mailbox leaned sideways. But there was something here he needed to face. The door opened before he could knock. A small woman appeared, gray hair in a low bun, wearing a faded yellow sweater. Her brown eyes, aged but kind, locked onto his with restrained surprise. "Blake?" she said softly. "Mom." She stepped aside. "Come in." It's getting cold. The living room was small, decorated with old portraits, crochet doilies on the sofa arms, and the scent of freshly baked cake. He sat slowly, like stepping on memories that might hurt. She watched him for a few seconds before sitting across from him. "You only show up here when you're broken inside," she said, without bitterness. Blake laughed faintly, eyes misty. "Maybe that's the only time I remember where I really come from." She said nothing, just waited. He took a deep breath, fingers laced over his knees. "I fell in love, Mom." She raised her eyebrows, surprised. "And that's a reason for such sadness?" "It's who I fell for, or what I did to her." He told her everything: the bet, the invitation, the teal dress, the ballroom, the video, the regret. Every word weighed 100 pounds. And finally, he said, his voice cracking, "She looked at me like no one ever had, and I destroyed that. Made her believe she was seen when it all started as a joke, like she was less." He bowed his head. The tears began to fall one by one. His mother, silent, got up and walked over. She sat beside him with difficulty, then placed her hand over his. "Do you remember why I left your grandfather's house?" He nodded. "Because he said you weren't good enough." "Exactly," she replied. "Being simple was never the problem. The problem has always been the pride of men who think love is possession, that beauty is status, that feelings are measured by appearances." She squeezed his hand. "You'll only deserve her, Blake, when you're man enough to love her for real. Not with pretty words or grand gestures, but with truth. With humility. With the courage to step down from your pedestal." He cried again, this time in silence. And in that moment, resting his head on the shoulder of the mother who raised him alone, he understood that what he felt for Rachel wasn't just guilt. It was love. Real love. Deep and painfully deserved. Rachel spent the following days as if trying to put out a fire inside with a glass of water at a time. The sudden fame, the interview invitations, the social media praise, everything that once seemed like a dream now suffocated her. None of it made sense without truth. On a Sunday morning, she woke before sunrise, opened her phone, and without hesitation, deleted all her social media. One by one, uninstalled, deactivated. Let silence take over. That same week, she handed in her resignation to the PR agency that had offered her a position as a symbol of triumph. The director, surprised, asked, "Do you realize what you're giving up?" Rachel replied calmly, "Yes, I'm refusing to be what they expect of me, instead of being who I am." She returned to the simplicity of the neighborhood she grew up in. The narrow hallways of the community college campus felt more real than any gala ballroom. She enrolled full-time in psychology. She wanted to understand what lived inside people who, like her, had been dismissed all their lives. By day, she studied. At night, she washed dishes at a modest diner near campus. The owner, a Latina woman named Rosa, gave her a chance without asking questions. And that was enough. But even with the structured routine, there was something Rachel couldn't control. The thought of him. Blake. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't longing for luxury. It was something else, more delicate, more dangerous. It was the memory of the look he gave her in the ballroom when their eyes met and he saw not just the dress, but the whole woman, the man behind the mistake, the sincere hesitation, the apology that never came but already lived in his eyes. One night, while walking home under Austin's dark sky, Rachel stopped in front of a closed bookstore window. Inside, stacks of old novels, dusty covers, and a quote stuck to the glass. "Everyone deserves a second chance, but only those who truly change know what to do with it." She rested her forehead against the glass for a few seconds, and, without realizing it, whispered to herself, "Is he changing?" Deep in her chest something pulsed. It wasn't just pain. It was a longing for a new beginning, for a love that may have been ripped out before it was born, but that could still be nurtured, even with tears. Rachel kept walking in silence. But now she no longer ran from what she felt. She simply waited, hoping he'd know what to do with what he'd left behind. It was an autumn afternoon in Austin, the kind where the wind carries dry leaves across the sidewalks and the cloudy sky seems to hold the world's breath. Inside the small university bookstore at Eastwood Community College, Rachel was organizing a new shipment of psychology books. She wore a loose burgundy sweater, dark jeans, and worn-out sneakers. Her hair, tied in a loose bun, let a few golden strands fall around her serene face. The bookstore was quiet at that hour. Just one or two students murmured between the shelves. The doorbell chimed softly. Rachel didn't look up immediately until she felt the silence shift, as if something had changed in the air. She turned slowly. Blake stood at the entrance. But he wasn't the man from the gala halls, the expensive suits, the cold eyes. He was someone else. He wore a light blue shirt, simple, sleeves rolled up to the elbows. His hair was a bit messy, his beard unshaved. In his arms, a small bouquet of white daisies, simple like her, and in his eyes there was a held-back tear. In truth, Rachel felt her heart race, but she didn't move, as if she needed to make sure it was real. He walked slowly to the counter. When he stopped in front of her, there was no audience, no spotlight, no cameras. Just the faint sound of pages turning and the wind. Outside against the window, Blake held the flowers with both hands and took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm not here to redeem myself, Rachel." She swallowed hard, saying nothing, just looked at him. "I don't expect you to forgive me just because I showed up, and I'm not expecting applause for changing. I just need to say one thing." He extended the flowers, his hands trembling. "I love you, and if you give me a chance, just one, I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Rachel felt tears well up. Time seemed to freeze, like that night at the gala. But this time it was different. Here stood the man behind the mask, without the shield of power, without the arrogance of a last name. She lowered her gaze for a moment, feeling the weight of everything they'd lived, of what he had caused, but also of what he'd managed to change. She looked up again and smiled. A small, emotional smile. A smile that carried pain. And a new beginning. "You took your time," she said softly, but firmly. "But you came the right way." Blake let out a breathy laugh, eyes shining. Rachel took the flowers, and in that gesture there was something stronger than words. It wasn't immediate forgiveness, nor forgetfulness. It was a beginning, built on broken pieces, but with the right hands. And for a moment, there among the books, the silence, and the memory, two hearts found each other again. Not at the place where it all started, but at the exact point where everything could finally be real. Months passed since the reunion at the bookstore. Life went on, but nothing was the same. Not because everything changed in a grand way, but because now Rachel and Blake knew exactly the value of rebuilding. Rachel accepted a new invitation, not to be the face of a campaign, but to work behind the scenes. She became an image and behavior consultant at a small but respected agency in Austin dedicated to women re-entering the workforce after long breaks, single mothers, women from shelters, survivors of domestic violence. She welcomed them with empathy, listened to each one with care, taught them to use clothing as a tool for self-esteem and confidence. But most importantly, she reminded them that beauty isn't found in the mirror, but in how you walk, even after you've fallen. "You think anyone will take me seriously dressed like this?" one client once asked, voice trembling. Rachel smiled and replied, They will, because you'll walk into that room like you've already won. And that has no price. Her presence made such an impact that the agency began using her story in talks. Without spotlights, but with respect. She was no longer the girl from the viral video. She was a professional with history, purpose, and voice. Across town, Blake was changing too quietly. The atmosphere at Harrington Enterprises was no longer the same. He cut ties with executives unwilling to adopt inclusive policies and launched internship programs aimed at youth from underserved communities. He implemented a code of ethical conduct protecting lower-tier employees from internal abuses. There's no point in donating millions to charities if you don't see the person who cleans your desk. He'd say in meetings, "We start from the ground. That's what holds up an empire." One afternoon, they met again at the agency where Rachel worked. He came to pick her up after a meeting nearby. He wasn't in a hurry, no phone in hand. Just a calm gaze and the same light shirt from that first day at the bookstore. She saw him walk in and smiled. "You're early. I like watching you work." She laughed, taking off her glasses and organizing some files. "And I like seeing you like this. Quiet, looking like a man who finally knows where he stands." He stepped closer, held her hand gently, and said, "I don't see you as a miracle that saved me. I see you as the truth that set me free." And so, with feet on the ground and the past in their eyes, they said yes months later. The wedding took place in Rachel's mother's garden, in a humble neighborhood where the smell of strong coffee mixed with flowers. There were wooden benches, floral arrangements made by neighbors, music from a local group, and tears from everyone, from those who knew their pain and how hard it had been to get there. Rachel wore an off-white, lightweight dress, her hair pinned with tiny daisies between strands. Blake, in a light shirt and suspenders, looked like a different man, not because he changed clothes, but because he changed from within. During his vows, he said, "I lost you the moment I saw you, and only found you when I lost myself. Today, I'm not marrying the woman who became a symbol. I'm marrying the woman who taught me that love doesn't humiliate. It lifts." Rachel, emotional, simply replied, "And I didn't marry the heir. I married the man who stripped himself of everything, just to finally fit into what we call love." In the end, there were no fireworks, no headlines, but there were joined hands, clear eyes, and the certainty that everything true is born with pain, but blooms when shame turns into courage. The lesson stayed engraved not only in their story, but in the lives Rachel touched every day. It doesn't matter where you come from, but who you choose to be, when you're finally seen for who you are. And that was today's story. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this plot? Leave your opinion in the comments, and from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story? If it moved you in any way, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who will also be touched by this message, and subscribe to the channel to keep following stories like this. And before you go, I picked another emotional story that will touch your heart even more. I'll see you there.